The film Dark Waters begins in Parkersburg, West Virginia in 1975. A group of local teenagers sneak out at night to swim in the river, but the moment two men from West Virginia Containment Services arrive, the kids quickly scatter. The men then spray a strange chemical all over the water from their boat, leaving the river covered in an unknown substance. The story then jumps to 1998, where we meet Robert Billot, a corporate defense lawyer working at a large firm. During a meeting, he is pulled out to meet a farmer named Wilbur Tennant. Wilbur brings a box filled with tapes and documents, claiming that a chemical company called DuPont is poisoning his land and killing his cows. He begs Robert to help, but Robert politely declines and returns to work. Later that day, Robert tries calling his grandmother from a pay phone but gets no answer. When he visits her the next morning in Parkersburg, he notices a young girl riding a bike. Her teeth are completely black and decaying. His grandmother welcomes him warmly, and after hearing about Wilbur, she encourages Robert to help him, reminding him that Wilbur is practically family. Robert visits Wilbur's farm, and the situation is worse than he expected. Wilbur shows him the dead cows, many with swelling, tumors, darkened teeth, and enlarged organs. Wilbur explains that his brother, who once worked at DuPont, fell mysteriously ill, and after he died, the company bought their land with the promise not to use it for dumping waste. But instead, they turned it into a chemical dump site. The runoff from that land has contaminated the creek and the water the cows drink. Wilbur then takes Robert to a field where over 190 cows have been buried, all dead from unexplained sickness. Even the veterinarians cannot identify a single cause, despite finding cancer, destroyed organs, and severe deformities. Wilbur is exhausted, angry, and out of options. Robert leaves the farm disturbed by what he has seen. At a company event later, Robert meets Phil Donnelly, DuPont's lead attorney. Robert casually brings up Wilbur's concerns, but Phil brushes it off and insists DuPont follows all environmental rules. He claims Wilbur's issues are unrelated and promises to keep Robert updated. Robert later tracks down an old EPA report that Wilbur had filed. The report says the cows died from poor nutrition and general farm mismanagement, something Wilbur strongly disagrees with. During Robert's next visit to the farm, one of the surviving cows suddenly behaves aggressively and charges at him. Wilbur is forced to shoot the cow to keep everyone safe. That moment convinces Robert that something far more dangerous is happening. Back at work, Robert meets with his boss, Tom. Tom doesn't like the idea of taking on a small, low-profit case, but Robert argues that Wilbur is a longtime family friend and deserves help. After some hesitation, Tom agrees. Robert then calls Phil to officially file the lawsuit, but Phil reacts coldly and promises to send over documents proving DuPont's innocence. By 1999, a full year later, Robert arrives home carrying boxes of paperwork that DuPont has provided. Instead of attending a family gathering, he stays up reading, determined to uncover the truth hidden inside those documents. As Robert digs through the huge stack of documents DuPont sent, nothing stands out at first, until he notices a chemical name, PFOA. He searches for it online but finds almost nothing. Later, while talking with a coworker, Robert wonders if the chemical might be older than the EPA's system for regulating toxic materials, which only began in 1975. If PFOA was created before that year, it would explain why the EPA has never reviewed it. At a private event, Robert confronts Phil about the chemical. Phil reacts angrily, embarrassing Robert in front of his wife and colleagues. The next day, Robert's boss scolds him for discussing work at a social gathering, but Robert insists that Phil is hiding something, and the only way to uncover the truth is through a court-ordered discovery. Working with a local attorney named Larry, Robert files a legal motion forcing DuPont to hand over their internal records. Phil responds by sending hundreds of boxes, clearly hoping to bury Robert in paperwork. But Robert refuses to back down. He goes through everything, page by page, until he discovers the internal name for PFOA, C8. He tracks down a chemical expert to ask about it. The expert explains that C8 is a completely man-made substance, similar to plastic, and it never breaks down. It's used in many everyday products, including coatings for paper, fabric, and cookware. But the expert has no idea what long-term health effects it may cause. Meanwhile, Wilbur tries to attend church with his family but is met with cold stares. Most people in town work for DuPont, and speaking against the company makes him an outsider. At the same time, Robert remembers the young girl he saw earlier with black, rotting teeth. He calls the expert back and learns that heavy exposure to PFOA could cause such damage. This pushes Robert to look deeper, and he soon finds documents showing C8 contamination in public water systems across West Virginia. Wilbur, dealing with a constant cough, visits the doctor. When the nurse rolls up his sleeve to take blood, they notice strange blisters all over his arm. Returning home, Wilbur senses something is wrong. His dog is acting strangely, and when he checks inside, he realizes his stored cow samples have been taken. He quickly hides the tapes under the floorboards as helicopters circle above the house. In panic, he fires into the air to scare them off. Back at the office, Robert studies an old photo of factory workers and zooms in on the logo on their shirts, Teflon. He searches the documents again and finds old magazine clippings about the chemical. At home, Robert becomes frantic. His wife wakes up to find him tearing apart the kitchen sink and the floorboards, convinced DuPont has contaminated the entire community. She thinks he's losing control, but Robert finally sits her down and explains everything. He tells her that DuPont created a synthetic chemical called PFOA, later branded as Teflon, because it repels water and oil. It was originally used for military tanks but eventually found its way into household products, especially non-stick pans. Inside DuPont's own reports, Robert discovered that workers exposed to Teflon began developing severe illnesses. To test the chemical further, DuPont even spiked cigarettes with the substance, and many smokers were hospitalized. Despite knowing the risk, the company kept producing it because it was cheap, profitable, and in high demand. As the chemical burned in their factories and leaked into their waste systems, it spread into the air, soil, and water of nearby towns. As Robert continues piecing together the truth, he discovers even darker details. He learns that DuPont tested the chemical on rats and monkeys, and every single test subject died with swollen, damaged organs. He also finds the story of a worker named Sue, who handled liquid PFOA while pregnant. She later gave birth to a severely deformed baby, a case DuPont kept hidden. While all of this unfolds, Robert's wife goes into labor. After their child is born, Robert anxiously keeps asking the nurses whether the baby is healthy. Thankfully, the newborn is fine, but Robert is now fully aware of what PFOA can do to families like Sue's. Over time, Robert explains everything he's discovered to his wife. For over 20 years, DuPont has been dumping Teflon chemicals into the river and surrounding land, even while knowing the health risks. He tells her how the company made billions from Teflon products, all while pumping more and more C8 into the air and water. At one point, the contamination became so extreme that people could actually see the chemical foaming on the surface of local creeks. When Robert brings this information to Wilbur, the farmer can barely speak without coughing, and both he and his wife have now been diagnosed with cancer. Even though Wilbur wanted justice, he is too sick to continue fighting, so Robert advises him to accept a financial settlement. Wilbur agrees, knowing that time is running out. Robert then delivers his full research and evidence to the EPA, uncovering internal memos and years of hidden data. He secretly arranges a meeting between Phil and Wilbur, where DuPont tries to pay Wilbur for silence. But before anything can be swept away, Robert appears on national television and exposes DuPont's actions to the entire country. Not long after, West Virginia issues a public statement claiming their water contains harmless levels of C8, something Robert knows is false. In 2001, another woman contacts him, wanting justice for her husband who died while working at DuPont. On his drive home, Robert remembers a new law stating that any company failing to safely dispose of toxic chemicals must provide medical aid to every affected person for life. With this in mind, Robert proposes a new plan: sue DuPont on behalf of 70,000 people whose water has been contaminated for decades. Other lawyers worry that challenging such a powerful corporation will hurt the firm's business, but the boss insists the public deserves justice. He allows Robert to move forward. In the first court hearing, a well-known attorney named Harry represents Robert. He calls an EPA representative to testify, but she lies on the stand, claiming the chemical levels are safe, terrified that the case might damage the EPA's reputation. Her false testimony sparks massive public outrage. Soon, people around the world begin protesting DuPont and boycotting Teflon products. The pressure becomes so intense that the EPA eventually issues a $16.5 million fine against DuPont for withholding information about PFOA. Robert then meets with DuPont's board of directors. He presents medical reports showing the illnesses linked to C8 contamination and demands long-term medical support for the community. The CEO agrees, but only if every affected resident undergoes blood testing by DuPont-approved scientists. By 2005, thousands of local residents, nearly the entire town, line up to give blood samples, each receiving $400 for participating. The news reaches Robert during Christmas, giving him a moment of relief. In 2006, Wilbur Tennant passes away from cancer. Robert's own health declines as the long legal battle drains his energy, and the recession causes trouble at his firm. He eventually collapses and is hospitalized, overwhelmed and worn down. During this time, he also encounters Sue's child, still living with the deformities caused by DuPont's chemical. Sue's child eventually grows into an adult, but the damage caused before birth never fades. His face remains visibly disfigured. 4 years later, the scientific committee finishes its research. Their findings confirm that PFOA is linked to 6 major diseases, and more than 3,500 people in the community show high levels of exposure. When Robert gets home that day, he receives devastating news. DuPont is refusing to provide medical support, ignoring the agreement, and trying to discredit the years of research he fought so hard to gather. Heartbroken and exhausted, Robert admits that maybe Wilbur was right, maybe the whole system truly is built to protect corporations, not people. But Robert's wife reminds him of something important: if he hadn't stepped forward, no one would have known the truth. Thousands of families would still be in the dark, drinking contaminated water with no idea what was happening to them. Her words give Robert the strength to keep fighting. In the final moments of the film, we see Robert continuing to take DuPont to court again and again, and winning. Case by case, he forces the company to compensate the people they harmed. His battle becomes a symbol of how one determined person can stand up to a massive corporation, even when the odds seem impossible.
Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.